for taking the time to be with us today for one of our 2 weekly calls here at the Georgia Chamber. There's over almost 800 people on the video conference with us today. This event is a co-partnership today with Steve Dolinger and the Georgia Partnership for Excellence in Education and Santiago Marquez with the Georgia Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. All three of our organizations are happy to host not just Superintendent Richard Woods today, but also his Chief of Staff, Matt Jones. Matt, thank you for being with us, and I know the Superintendent will be joining us in a moment. Before we get started, I do want to I'm happy to tell you that on Thursday at 11 o'clock, we will be hosting another call, this time with Governor Kemp. And so go ahead and put that on your calendars for Thursday at 11 o'clock. Those invitations should be going out later today. And also wanted to remind you that in the last 24 hours, the Georgia Chamber's posted 2 new packets of information on our COVID-19 website. One is kind of a full overview of the shelter-in-place order and how businesses are to comply with that order, and also how to understand if you're an essential or critical business. And then also today we're releasing an overview of the small business programs that are out there, and a packet that contains all the information you need for the Paycheck Protection Act, as well as the SBA loans that are available to you. So with that, we still have more people coming in. I think we're almost up. Yet we're over 800 now. So thank you guys for checking in. Here's how we're going to go today. We have Superintendent Richard Woods joining us in a moment. We have his Chief of Staff, Matt Jones. We're going to let Matt give a little overview about what's happening with education in Georgia, and then Steve, I, and Santiago will all ask questions that come from our membership since we put it out to you guys last week. And so we'll move through a series of those questions and try to wrap us up today by about 2:30 or just a little bit after. So Matt, while we wait on the superintendent, give us a little update on where we are today with education in Georgia after the governor's order last week about kids not coming back to school this year.
Yeah, sure. First off, just thank the 3 of you for hosting this, the 3 organizations, and your focus on K-12 during this time. We have a website that we're dedicated to any K-12 related resources with COVID-19. It's gadoe.org/coronavirus, and we're keeping that regularly updated with resources and tools and information for the public. So we stress people to continue to check back there for the most up-to-date information. The governor's decision to close schools for the rest of the school year was a smart decision, both from the public health point of view, but also the educational point of view. I think it provided a lot of stabilities to school leaders as they're doing their planning. So I know they've appreciated that. We also recently heard from USAID that we got approval for our waivers around testing and accountability. We were one of the first states to suspend testing and accountability for this school year so that schools could focus on what was important, which was the well-being of their students and staff. So we're glad to get approval from USAID on that front, and we're also glad to see Congress working with the president to approve stimulus funding, and we're particularly excited about K-12 having an emphasis in that funding to the states.
That's great. I just see that Superintendent Woods just joined us. Superintendent, thank you for being with us today.
Yeah, you're quite welcome.
Superintendent, Matt was just giving a little bit of an overview. Welcome. Any comments to you before we jump into questions?
Well, again, I appreciate everything that's being done across the state from the Governor Kemp and his leadership, but more importantly, I think as we go down into the district level, our superintendents and staff members down there are doing a phenomenal job just reaching out and maintaining, learning as best we can during some very interesting times.
Well, thank you, sir. And we appreciate you and Matt and your whole department's leadership and servant leadership as we move through this. Here's what we'll do is I'll ask a question, and then I'll let either you or Matt answer, and then Steve will go to Steve and then over to Santiago. Our first question comes from, we've actually heard this question from multiple members that are very involved with their local schools districts. And it comes to the education relief funding that was in the CARES Act. And I'll just read the question to you. We've been told that the funding mechanism through the CARES Act is tied to each district's share of Title I funding from the previous year, but then we also know that some districts have adjusted their Title I funding, and our members are worried that some schools may be excluded from those federal dollars that might come in. And I know that Secretary DeVos just had a ruling this morning that impacted the process, and curious of where we are and how we're going to make sure that Georgia schools get their equal share of funding that they need and deserve from the CARES Act.
Well, I think that, our first priority is making sure the funding gets there as quickly as we possibly can deliver it. That's one thing we are definitely working with the USAID on, and just making sure we follow the guidelines that are set by them. As we look at, our schools, we've been in an area of flexibility for several years now and using Title I funds with flexibility. But we have, setting out some guidelines that we do want to make sure that we address various populations, at-risk populations, distance learning, school meals, mental health, supplemental learning, and facilities and equipment. This definitely is a priority, but we have 1.8 million students, so this is just one bucket of funding that we have. And so we want to, look at how can we maintain learning for all students, because every student needs to, have a level of success that is expected throughout the state.
Thank you, Superintendent. Steve?
Superintendent Wood, Steve Dollinger here from the Georgia Partnership.
No, sir.
We've heard a lot from our rural superintendents that what's keeping them up at night is the instructional gap of their students. They realize that only about half of their kids have internet access, and the other half just aren't getting the instruction. What's DOE doing to help these rural superintendents with that problem?
Excuse me. Well, I think that, looking at the 50% number, seems a little bit high. So I'm not sure exactly, where that is, but we know there are challenges that are, across the state. But more importantly, technology is just a tool. It's a tool for delivery. Right now, we are seeing a wide variety of instructional methods being used. So I think that if it is online, go-to meetings, possibly. There are a lot of packets that are educational packets that are being, shared with the students, even as they pick up meals during the day. Our teachers are reaching out to make sure that learning is taking place throughout the state. We work with different agencies and nonprofit groups to map out hotspots. So we continue to put that information out. So, perhaps you could drive to a library or some other location. Again, I think that Matt mentioned our website at gadoe.org/coronavirus. So it has a lot of good learning tools and supplemental stuff on that area as well. Internet connectivity, I think for rural Georgia, where a place I'm very familiar, continues to be a challenge. I think during a time of crisis, some of your shortcomings or issues definitely are highlighted. And I think that's where we're at. But hopefully, it allows us to think about the future. I think right now we know where we are. But definitely, I think, looking at connectivity across the state from not only an educational standpoint, but also an economic standpoint would be a great place to, perhaps look at a great foundation where we need to start in the future as well.
Thank you, sir. Santiago?
Superintendent Woods, great to be with you. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
Our question comes from our membership, the Hispanic Chamber, and the first question we have is: we know this crisis is disproportionately impacting low-income, minority, and housing and food insecure families and students in terms of parents losing jobs, access to technology, and fast internet. Could you share more about your current efforts to support these students and what interventions will be implemented when students return to their physical schools?
Well, I think as we look at the issue, again, this is something we've been concerned with, but it's something that, is not unusual for us within education. We do face challenges with different groups, poverty being perhaps the biggest, barrier to educational success throughout the state. But looking at how we can fill those digital gaps through, as has been mentioned, with devices, we are working with different partners to put devices in hands, trying to expand the bandwidth, and as I mentioned, trying to look at, where are hotspots so that people can have access. We are doing some things with the Georgia Foundation of Public Education as well, and looking at how we can make sure that we efficiently implement the CARES Act. As mentioned, I think looking at students that are definitely, of great concern just because of some of the barriers that they do face, such as our at-risk students, distance learning, school meals, mental health, supplemental learning facilities. We're going to try to, and we're working on a delivery system that does meet those needs. Working with school systems to say, what does an after-school program look like right now? When we get back into school, we'll pick up right where we left off. This is something that, as I've shared before, that we are continuing to serve our students in the various ways. Right now, we do have a few challenges, but by and large, we're doing some great things. I think we're, sharing with some of our teachers how to instruct digitally, and of course, this would have a broad impact, across the state and allow us to better reach some of the kids that definitely have some challenges.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Superintendent. Steve, I'll let you ask the next question. Go ahead.
Well, Superintendent Woods, you were just talking about teachers and the connectivity. Teachers have done a great job in pivoting really quickly from a bricks and mortar school to a virtual school. What are you hearing from teachers about that connectivity and the challenges? And is DOE planning any additional professional development for them to get ready for this new digital environment?
Well, I think for us as a department, I appreciate Dr. Osborne and Dr. Dooley for the work they've done in preparing some online classwork, and we've had a great attendance with that, sharing with individuals who are professionals within our own virtual school. These people, of course, deal with digital learning day in and day out, so we kind of package their expertise to create a class for teachers at large, but also with teachers with delivery to special needs students. And so we look at a wide variety of challenges that are there, but we're doing some things to make instructional learning as pleasant and perhaps as efficient as we can, meeting some needs. For our teachers, and especially a lot of our younger teachers, technology, I think they were probably just born with it. And so that has kind of helped out in that delivery. Definitely our students, if anyone, perhaps they are the greatest teachers we have, and as they help us navigate some of this, and have been a great resource for us at the state to say, hey, how can we actually communicate and talk with you in a way, in a language which these kids have grown up with. So we're looking at content, we're looking at doing some things virtually. We've had some great partnerships with Georgia Public Broadcasting as well. And again, with the website I mentioned, there's a lot of great resources for teachers as well to pull down from to support what's going on day in and day out in the field.
And Steve, I'll just add to what the superintendent said really quick is the Georgia Virtual School is actually a part of the Department of Education. And like the superintendent mentioned, they're really experts in this field. So we've really tapped into their talent and resources. And we really rolled out quickly 2 classes that were available to all teachers. One was shifting to online learning. So it was a class that all teachers could take in the state to really talk about the shift and some tools that are out there. And the second course that we rolled out recently was how to serve students with disabilities online. Those have been phenomenal courses. We've gotten a lot of positive feedback, and we've had thousands of teachers participate in those free online courses.
Santiago, do you have a question?
I do. Superintendent, what support programs are in place to ensure students on free and reduced lunch have access to food while they are not in school?
Well, I think once the crisis really began, I appreciate Dr. Lynette Dobson, who was over our nutrition team at the DOE, and also I want to just give a great shout out of praise for U.S. Agriculture Secretary Perdue. They've been phenomenal to work with as we've reached out to them, to look at acquiring waivers that would increase the number of students eligible for meals. So again, we have worked very hard to make sure that food is in the tables, and that that we can meet this really a critical need. To be honest, across the state, we've literally served millions. I think day in and day out, within public education, our nutrition team, we're probably the largest catering entity in the state. And now perhaps, we are the largest delivery system across the state as well with the meals that are being delivered. So as we look at that, we're preparing and working, partnering with food banks as well, provide pantries. People of Georgia have been phenomenal as well as just volunteering and supporting what's going on within the nutrition area to help food get out. Just one quick story that I recall. I mean, we had a bus driver and I think either a teacher or a support person that was riding, delivering meals. So I mean, we're hitting that across the state using this. But this one individual said, "Hey, I know where a family is, and that perhaps doesn't know about this." And so they drove down, and next thing you know, we find out these individuals hadn't had food for about 3 days. So we're going above and beyond. I guess any expectation across the state to make sure that our kids are being fed. And, again, just really want to just thank the people that are out there because this has been a team effort from the federal government all the way down to our local districts.
Thank you. It's been incredible.
Superintendent, questions from some of our members that are parents, since they're kind of wearing both hats here, at the same time, like me with my 8th grader. We saw this week that the Carroll County, Chattahoochee County, and some other counties now are talking about ending school earlier than the end of May, actually ending the first week of May now. And I know that your board allowed them that ability and authority. What are you hearing from school districts around the state? Do you think that's a trend that we're going to see more and more of these school systems close early this year? Or any suggestions, or also what are you recommending to the superintendents out there?
Well, I think each school system knows, their district, better than anyone. And so I trust, their thoughts and what they're working on. In some areas, I'm hearing that, yes, we may, end the school year early, but also start the next school year even earlier as well. Mm-hmm. So I think everyone's trying to balance it out, look at this. I mean, this has really been kind of a moving target. As you know, we started off, it was just 2 weeks, and then we added another couple weeks, and the next thing you know, here we are. Looking at May and no brick and mortar schools. So we're trying to look at some things to make sure that our children and staff members are safe. I think that's first and foremost on anything we do. And so that will continue to be one of our primary missions. We definitely have our website, which again offers a lot of support to parents. I've been quite amused at some of the posts that our parents have put, on the internet on some things with that as they become homeschool teachers as well. But, I think for us, it's just, if I had a word of advice, it's just using common sense. Right now, if we look at where we were within our, the school year, we were getting ready for spring break, and then that would have been followed by the testing cycle. So a lot of what really had been learned was really on the front side. So I feel very good about that. I think trying to make those adjustments of how do we, make sure we don't lose an extended, summer slide, I guess. So I think that some of the things I'm hearing across the state has been very encouraging. I think for us is making sure right now that our dual enrollment students are continuing to get credit there as well. That's been, a unique challenge, but I appreciate USED or not USED, but USG, our university system, and the technical college for being great partners there, but also looking at what graduation looks like, because, we know that, for us, education is just not K-12. We do have a group that are seniors that will be moving on. So it's been a great partnership. We're looking at some various alternatives, and, and I think that as whatever our districts decide, we're here to support them. And we want to make sure that we have the resources. I think trying to get this money in the hands as we quickly can, and focusing on true educational needs will continue to be a primary focus for us.
Great. I have a couple of questions left, but I want to give Steve and Santiago both an opportunity to ask a last question and any comments that they have. So, Steve, I'll go to you first, and then Santiago.
All right. Thank you, Chris. We certainly applaud the efforts that our teachers and administrators have made, both in the response, a quick response, and their relief efforts. But we're hearing from school leaders that while they realize that they're still in the eye of the storm, so to speak, they're wanting to look ahead at recovery. What's going to be next? So, Superintendent Woods, could you tell us, in addition to the information I saw the DOE put out today, which answers some questions, How can we help school leaders start thinking about this next school year and be prepared for that?
Well, I think right now the biggest thing that has been, I guess, reassuring is that we know what the school year looks like, our current school year. And so it allows us to think about, where we need to move from here. I think, as I mentioned, some schools are looking at perhaps starting a little bit early to get a refreshing and then begin the actual school year. So that may be an option, throughout the state. Our initial focus, right now was that, hey, we cleared all the regs. We cleared all the testing. So that we could actually focus on teaching. So that's been, a very big positive for us. As we think about the future, I think you're looking right now of sitting back, and I actually was talking with some staff, what is actually working? We obviously have seen some issues and concerns. We've seen a lot of innovation and improvement. So, how do we put that into practice? I think that what we're doing now should actually just be a continuation of the education process. We don't know what the future holds. And right now we can just speak until the end of May. Now things may, pop up, things may change. And of course we know this has been kind of a moving target as we do move forward. But I think that as we look at forward, we're doing some things, looking at how we test individuals, giving our teachers a new tool that will be more of a formative assessment in which it will be kind of tiered. So, they'll be able to look and measure where their kids actually are and start that learning process. So I think that will help us catch kids up, but also help kids that are on the front end to continue to move forward. My commitment is that, we're going to be there for our districts, as we look at this planning, making sure that they have the money and the funding. That'll be something, it will continue to be an issue. And again, as we look at, we still have to, look at the budget and what that will look like as well. So as, facts unroll, we'll be able to make those adjustments. But, so far I've been very pleased at just how nimble public education has been at really reaching and providing for our kids. So, we'll, take it a day at a time, but thinking about the future, we know that our expectations that probably school will start on time and, our kids will be there, our teachers will be there. It'll probably be one of the happiest days for parents and students and teachers and everyone involved. So we're looking forward to that. But I'm excited about where we are, and and I feel sure that if there are any special needs that we need to address, we will. We'll continue to work with our partners with USAID to make sure that we're in line and doing what we need to do to make sure that every child has a great education and really just they'll have an opportunity to success in life.
Thank you, sir.
Hey, Santiago.
Yes, sir. Superintendent. And for the record, I used to work at Boys and Girls Clubs of America, spent 5 years there. So after school programs are a big part of my life, were a big part of my life. And so they're a huge resource to students in terms of getting help with homework, snacks, a safe place to play, grow, develop. How is Georgia DOE leveraging existing partnerships to support students in terms of specific services? How do you see this potentially evolving over the summer months?
Well, I think right now, taking advantage of the new partnerships that we have developed, we are finding out that we as Georgia, when we come together, wow, what can we accomplish? And we're seeing a lot of great things, whether it's, the extension of our meals program, looking at how we deliver content. I've appreciated, business partners leveraging that, looking at foundations as well, and groups such as Boys and Girls Clubs. How can we, come together? I think having a more comprehensive approach to education is extremely important. Working with agencies, we're doing a much more efficient job with that, as I've mentioned, with the University System of Georgia and the Technical College System of Georgia has been a great leveraging for us as well. Reaching out to other agencies, I think the task force that the governor has created has allowed us to reach out to perhaps individuals that knew of education, but we just didn't really have a relationship. And so I think taking advantage of this time of the relationship building that's going on, looking at funding, looking at how we can, leverage the resources and the foundation for Georgia public education, and such as the partnership as well, that we are, extending those collaborative processes. And I think as we do that, we're going to talk, we're going to learn, we're going to listen, And everyone, one thing I found out, everyone has come to the plate when it comes to Georgia's children. And that's been very exciting.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
sir.
Superintendent. Richard, I'm curious. You cover a lot of room here. I mean, we talked everything from the feeding the students to the educating the students, the care for them after school, during school, their mental health. So many different issues out there. Right now, in the midst of this pandemic and the economic recession that we're moving into, what keeps you up at night? What worries you the most as you kind of think about going forward?
Well, I think that, for myself, I was a senior and I actually moved into Fitzgerald, which I know you're very familiar with.
Right.
I was expecting to graduate from Daugherty High School. That's where I had spent a large portion and moved my senior year. So, I have a, heart for seniors. I was a high school teacher, and I think, trying to, meet their needs and, because I know there's a lot of disappointment out there. They want a graduation, they want a prom, they want to, spend time, with their kids, or with their, fellow peers and stuff. But, for me, it's just making sure that our needs are being met. I think we're trying to do some things, whether, it's mental health and doing some wonderful things. I appreciate Dr. Gary McGivney and that effort, because this is kind of a big trauma for a lot of kids. Their world literally has been, turned upside down. So how do we meet that need so that they are prepared, to learn? Meeting the needs of, having our kids having food, day in and day out is an issue. But also, our big primary concern is, what does learning look like? We want to make sure that when our kids graduate, that, they have the opportunity to enroll, to go to, higher ed and continue on with that education that will lead them to a great job, or to enlist, to join the military or go straight into the workforce, to become an employer or an employee. So, those are things that, just trying to make sure that we at the department are meeting the needs that we are serving and supporting our local districts, because that's where the learning takes place. And I think that if we're doing that job, then, I feel we're in a good spot. I think as we look, we continue to say, hey, where can we improve? And we always want to improve. And I think, this has given us an opportunity to really see what is really important in education. But for me, it's always been about kids. That's what keeps me up day in and day out. And making sure that our teachers, because I know as a teacher, that relationship is very special. Our kids, I think, they remember their teachers, not a test. And that's because we are in the people business. And I guess if I had to say, that's what keeps me up at night, is just making sure that the needs of our kids, and our teachers are met, because, they want to be in school. This is not a fun time for them.
Right. You covered a lot of area. One last question. Someone just texted me. Speaking of those graduating seniors, have we had discussions yet with the Georgia Student Finance Commission about how you're going to calculate GPA in regards to the Hope Scholarship for next year?
Yeah, well, I think that's something we've looked at, as we move forward. Right now, I mean, there has to be a numeric grade for our high school seniors and those in high school taking the class. So we are looking at that. I think, we're trying to rely on our districts to say, what does that look like? Because, simply said, I mean, we're looking at valedictorians, we're looking at salutatorians, those are groups where you have additional financing and support that comes with those. Do appreciate, we've had some great discussions with Chancellor Wrigley and also Commissioner Dozer with the USG and TSG, I think, because, what are you going to accept? I mean, they've actually waived some of the SAT, ACT, so we're trying to make that as easy as possible. But we continue to have those dialogues with Georgia Student Finance, and we're trying to streamline that process to make sure that every kid has access to the Hope Scholarship, Zell Miller Scholarship, and working kind of the nuances that are there. But fortunately, a little common sense, and what I found out, we've been able to streamline a lot of processes. So I'm very encouraged right now.
I bet. Well, Superintendent, thank you, and thank Matt for all that you guys are doing. I think well that the GPE, Hispanic Chamber, the Georgia Chamber, quite frankly, every chamber in Georgia, we care, and workforce development talent is a priority for us. Always has been. And so we stand ready to help you and your team this year, and as we move into next year, we appreciate that. For those of our members on the call, I want to thank our Onshore Outsourcing, which is our sponsor for today's call. I also want to remind you that Governor Kemp will be joining us on Thursday at 11 o'clock, and you should be getting that information out. And then as things continue to happen, Superintendent, with you and your team, let us know so we can share that information out with our members. And we're here for you to call on 24/7 with anything that we can do in our membership to help the kids of Georgia and our teachers as well. So thank you all for being with us today, and I hope that you'll join us on Thursday with Governor Kemp and continue to follow us on our social media channels. So thank all y'all very much. Thanks,
you.
guys.
Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate it.
All right, take
Chris,
care.
thanks, Superintendent.
Hey, thanks for the shout
Thank you,
out.
sir.
Thanks for the purple